evening or a global warm welcome for today's community design chat. This is the last one for the summer, the fifth one in total. My name is Julika Lomas. I'm situated in Amsterdam, and I have the honor today to talk to a guest who is joining us momentarily from San Diego itself. That's why I'm hosting it, and the Design Lab is the guest in today's chat. I've been doing this community building for the Design Lab for a couple of years now, designer in residence, and that is fine even if I'm far away, because we built an online community that we want to build together. So it's community driven, design driven. It is for you that are now watching, people from San Diego and other continents to contribute. So ask your questions in the chat. And the topics that we'll be covering are topics that are more on the pulse of time, trends such as urban design, design for equity, design futures, ethics in design, design in health, design in the new normal or at scale. So away from the interior design and architectural design and older topics of design. I'll be inviting guest in a moment, and that will be the newly appointed director of the Design Lab. Here you are. Good evening, Dr. Nguyen, or morning in your case.
Yes, hi. It's so nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining this digital space, despite the ocean and the thousands of miles. And I was just introducing this fifth chat, community design chat, and that we have the honor that you are joining us exactly from the Design Lab as the newly appointed director since the spring on the topic of designing for racial equity or designing inclusive urban spaces. Allow me to hand it over to you so you can introduce yourself and as how you want to be known and by the community that's watching.
Sure, yes. Welcome, everybody. I am happy to announce that I am actually in the Design Lab. I'm the only one here.
Right after holiday weekend, yeah.
Yes, after a holiday weekend. But I'm just thrilled to be on campus and to be in the Design Lab after starting in March remotely. It's nice to be actually physically here. I am a professor in the Urban Studies and Planning Department here at UCSD, and I'm also the newest director of the Design Lab, taking over for Don Norman, who is our founding director.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I see you hold a degree from the University of Irvine, which is an hour north of San Diego, but then also over to the East Coast, so Philadelphia, Pennsylvania State University. So I really like that you span the U.S. Also as a continent or as a country. So yeah, let's get into the topic. For someone that is also new for this, can you tell us, in maybe paraphrase, what we'll be talking about today for someone that is maybe new to these terms or uncomfortable?
Yeah, sure. So I'm an urban planner, and when I think about design, I think about designing communities at a scale that typically when urban planners talk about community and the community scale, it's often the neighborhood. And so I think about neighborhood scales, I think about city scales. We often work at the local scale. I also do a lot of regional planning, so at the regional scale. And then there's lots of other different scales, state level, national level. But I think most commonly we work at a sort of a city scale, a regional scale. Because that's sort of a manageable scale where you can actually see change, you can see growth, you could really dig into community-driven design, sort of the authentic, community-engaged, public participation, really work with community members and community-based organizations to create change. And so I think about systems and structures in order to design communities in a way that's more equitable, more just, more inclusive, and to really address some of the systemic inequalities that exist within our society.
Yeah, and I realize we're hosting this out with maybe followership, people listening outside of the US. So I realize there's culture in it and and history knowledge that's bound to a country, to a nation. And maybe tell us a little bit why you mentioned this is in the shadows of Ferguson, and why this is what it means to design this in the US right now.
Yeah, so I work both in the US context, but also overseas. I work in Southeast Asia. And when you plan communities, you plan and you work in communities, I think the first step that you have to, the first step of good planning is to know your community's history, right? To really dig in and understand why certain groups have not received the same resources. Why is the city laid out in this manner? Why do certain groups live over in this part of town and other groups live in other parts of town? Why is the central business district, why are their firms located where they are, right? Kind of really digging in deep and understanding your community, because inevitably in pretty much all of our cities, we have inequality, we have segregation, and understanding how those systems and structures have been set up will then help you start to try to dismantle those systems of inequality. And so regardless of where you work, I work in the US. I had a project where I worked in St. Louis, Missouri. This was inspired by the death of Mike Brown Jr., a young teenager who was killed by a white police officer in the street. And his body was left out there for 4 hours. It was in the middle of summer, so very hot. And this sparked a global reckoning around race and violence and really structural inequality that then seems to happen pretty frequently, these types of events. And for me, people were talking about policing and racism, individual racism, sort of the police officer on the Black teenager. But I wanted to dig in even deeper and look at 100-year history of St. Louis that set the system up where a young Black teenager walking on the street can be shot by a white police officer, right? How did this actually, why does this happen repeatedly? And so I created this multimedia project to really tell a story, use storytelling, but also use data to tell a story about how the city was designed and set up to be unequal for Black Americans and white Americans. And I think that once we have a reckoning and a real true understanding that these problems are systemic, and that's when we can actually start to tackle the problem.
Yeah, I mean, what I like is that you go deep in you go 100 years back, and you say you dig deep to understand the history of it. And I think this is encouraging for anyone that may not know the US history so well, or it's new on the topic, to just start watching maybe YouTube videos on the topic that we're talking tonight about. And because living in a community, it makes sense to understand what's the fabric of it, what's the makeup of it. So I really appreciate that you dug deeper and dug further and you focus on this. Tell me a little bit. So this is one example of a project that you're working in. What are obstacles in this work? What are things that are tough to design through, or what are obstacles?
Yeah. So I just relocated from North Carolina and spent 2 weeks on the West Coast. So I went to the state of Washington, the state of Oregon before relocating to San Diego.
Yeah.
And one of the most striking visualizations that I saw in traveling the West Coast was this issue of homelessness. And I'm a housing scholar. I study housing, I study neighborhoods. And as I traveled the West Coast, I saw all of these homeless encampments. I mean, they were right there. They're on the freeway, right? You can see them when you're driving. They're in the public parks. You can see them when you're walking around. And it just struck me, this immense homelessness problem here in the United States. And it made me think about how our systems and institutions have failed to provide the most basic need, a home, right? A house, a shelter. This is not true in other countries. Other countries have what's called a right to housing, where the government, the national government, says that local governments need to provide their residents with housing. And they enforce it, right? There's funding that's attached to it. They make sure that they regulate this, right? But we don't have that system here in the US. And it made me think, how is this even possible with the vast amounts of wealth here in this country, right? Where on the one hand, we have during COVID, that many people actually did much better financially. They benefited during this period of a global, crisis, a pandemic, whereas others were homeless and, didn't have access to clean water and didn't have access to good health care. And so it just makes you think that, and if you dig deeper in understanding why, it's because we've set up this system whereby the rich will only get richer, right? It's embedded in our economic system, our political system. I'll just give you an example. In the US, most people build their wealth through buying a home, right? And interest rates in this country to get a home loan, they are at historic low levels. I mean, they're just, incredibly low. And so there is a segment of the population that can access those incredibly low interest rates to buy a home and then to build wealth and to pass it on to their children. But if you don't have the money to get into the housing market right now, you're going to be left out. Your kids are going to be left out, right? And the poor are never going to be able to access the human, social, and financial capital to buy a home and to break out of this cycle of poverty. And so because in the US, we build much of our wealth through housing, we're going to continue to have increasing inequality, this vast inequality. And it just makes you think there's something wrong with the system. So how do we fix this system, right? Oftentimes we kind of think the narrative, the public narrative there, oh, well, the poor need to just get a job and they just need to work harder and they need to save their money and they need to buy a home. Actually, even if they did everything right, they could never, many of them could never afford to buy a home in these markets, in these very expensive housing markets. And so there's a failure. There's a failure in which we've designed our policies and designed our communities so that only some people get to benefit.
I'm glad how well you outline and explain this. And anyone who's watching this, please do ask questions, especially if you're outside of the US and have a question as someone who's in Europe or another continent or culture, do ask. I'm talking to you from the Netherlands and I've lived in Germany and in San Diego. So I also see those cultural contrasts. I mean, there's much more social housing in Amsterdam, the city itself. It is much more common for people to buy homes, even people that are in training and in college, and it is much more affordable, even in a city like Amsterdam. So lowering the threshold for someone to be a homeowner, you say, and then to accumulate wealth and pass that down, that is can be systemically made more harder or easier to attain. So that is, I'm glad how you outline and describe this. In your role as the director of the Design Lab, what are projects that you work on and how this community can support you, this online community, this global community of people that just get started to be interested in it or already fully in the topic?
Yeah, well, we have a lot of exciting work going on in the Design Lab. For those of you who are just becoming familiar with the Design Lab, it is an interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary group of scholars, faculty, students, staff members who are really trying to get at the root causes of our social problems, right?
Yeah.
We're not only designing things, right? But we're designing systems so that we can shape and make a better future for the next generation, right? I think that I think the ways in which people can get involved is to start to think about how can you affect systems and structures for social change, right? In everything you do, whether or not you're a student, how can you learn more about getting at the root causes of structural inequality? If you are a designer out in the field, you know, there's ways in which you can affect social change in all of the communities that you're a part of, whether it be at work and in your work life, right? There's a lot of people that you can affect change there, and to change institutions and organizations that you're a part of in your daily work life, or in the larger community, right? How can you spend your time so that you are, one, learning about your community, and two, really contributing to affecting positive social change. And design can really help with that. Having a design mindset, understanding design processes, and using design to affect social change.
Yeah, I mean, and that's how I experienced the design lab when I was there, and also inside and on its fringes to the outside. It is very inclusive, very open arms and open doors. So anyone who's in San Diego, I think, can literally walk on campus into your space. And I really appreciate the can-do and optimistic stance that I've experienced over there. It's whether I asked the hardest question, it was always like, that's a great question, and then came the answer. So there's definitely yeah, lifting one another on topics like this. And I'm from the community team, there's the education team, the research team, and you'll be directing this. Are you more affiliated with research, community, or education, or are you in all three?
All three. And what I'd love to do is to actually, you know, create more synergies across these, you know, what you call these three different buckets, right? Education, yeah, community, and research. Because I think that if we create these synergies, that they will strengthen each one of those pillars of the design lab. I really think that the work of the community team, right? This sort of outwardly facing, community engaged group that we have in the design lab is wonderful, because you're building these networks of designers. You're connecting the campus community with designers in the field, with industry partners. And I think that for me, where innovation comes, you know, happens is in this space where we're working across sectors, right? We're working with the public sector and the private sector and the academics, and we're working across different multiple layers of planning, multiple scales of planning, you know, from communities to regions to the state and the globe, right? If we can think about looking at design, multi-scalar design, I think that we can have greater impact.
Yeah, I like it that you're kind of connecting the pillars, or these buckets that aren't, they're leaking into one another. Do you have North Stars? Like, it's always, I think, interesting to see what inspires you, what is a project that you just get your eyes start glistening because it just really strikes a tone in you. What are the projects that you hold high and dear?
So, you know, the people that inspire me the most are my colleagues who are so passionate about their work, right? When I have been, in the last 3 months that I've been on the job, I've met with a lot of my faculty members, students, and the passion that they bring to their work is what really drives me to come to work every day and to do what I do to support them, right? To make, for me, the best part of my job is to help others reach their full potential. And when they are so committed, passionate about design, it makes my job a lot easier, right?
I can imagine. So it sounds like there is a positive energy, and as you may know, I have a background in psychology. I try to bring design into the field of life design, of what does it have to do with oneself as a person, and how can we go about, on the smallest unit of the human person, design a life that's also sustainable and leaving good impact. What about all this connects to you as a person, as you've been born and raised and grown up and experienced experienced life. What connects to you? If someone wants to get a look also behind the scenes of the design lab of the new director.
Yeah, that's a big question. So I think that what drives me is, I am a refugee. So I came from a war-torn country, and from parents who didn't speak any English, right? Moving to a country where we were new and often not really accepted. We came after the Vietnam War, and that was a very highly contentious war. In Vietnam, we call it the American War. So depending on where you're sitting, the war is called a different thing. But being an outsider, being somebody who has had to learn a new language, being somebody who's had to learn a whole new culture and customs, and growing up, just being very cognizant of that, drives me to create inclusive spaces where people want to be a part or feel welcomed in being a part of any space that I'm in, whether it be in my home, as you said, these different scales, in the design lab, on campus, in the community, right? I think that having that experience and that perspective really drives me to create these spaces of inclusivity.
So that's interesting. Yeah, to experience joining a culture, to being an outsider upon arrival or because of language, gives you a view of how open are the doors and how accessible is it, and can you actually enter sideways. So thank you for sharing that. Some people are asking if they're who your colleagues are that you were talking about.
Yeah.
So can you name a few, or just if they want to get curious on the website where to find more information about these inspiring colleagues?
Sure. I'm inspired by the community team every day. So people like Michelle Morris and Emily and yourself working on these great projects. Michelle and her team have put together, along with community members, actually, the Design Forward Alliance, have put together a bid for San Diego and Tijuana, this region here, this binational, bi-city bid to become the World Design Capital. And this designation would be, if we received it, would be in 2024. So that's exciting. It brings together community members. It brings together government and elected officials and planners in the area, and also faculty from across campus to work on design-related projects within the region and the bi-region, actually in Tijuana and also in San Diego. And since we're a border community, right, it's really exciting to be working with our border city. And so it's, walking into this position and seeing all of the tremendous hard work in putting together that binational, bi-regional bid was really inspiring and incredible. And all of the people that were involved in that to make that happen. And if we actually do get the bid, it's going to be incredible. I'm inspired by Don Norman, right, the founding director of the Design Lab. I mean, you can't talk about design without talking about Don's work and his incredible, just so many books that he's written on this topic, right? He's inspired generations of designers. And then my faculty, right? People. What I love about the Design Lab is that I'm an urban planner, but I get to see research being conducted by cognitive scientists and computer scientists, faculty in the business school, faculty in the arts and humanities. And so I get exposed to all of this incredible research. Oftentimes when you're a faculty member, you're kind of siloed in a department with people who are similar to you. And because now I'm situated in the Design Lab, I get to be exposed to all of this incredible research from across campus. And so that's inspirational, right? The technology that they use, it's cutting edge, right? The ideas that they have about collaborating with other faculty from across campus, right? These collaborations that spark synergy and innovation and new ideas. Just being a part of that ecosystem is inspiring.
Thank you very much. So you gave very concrete examples of Design Forward Alliance. That is also the first ever design conference in San Diego. I was actually there a few years ago, maybe 4, maybe 5, if I'm guessing. And the managing director, Michelle Morris. So these names you can find on the website, and now you have a story to them. So there's the community team that's working hard and built this bid. And anyone who's never been to San Diego, maybe Los Angeles is for some people outside the US more on the map, but San Diego is really just a trolley ride away from Mexico. Then you get off the trolley and you need to walk over, and this border is very, I think, permeable too. It's for many people that on a daily basis commute left and right, and it's also very close. So it's very interesting to see what design could do with this bi-national, bi-city, bid, and probably opportunity. How can people support that bid or the application for being the World Design Capital in 2024?
Sure, that's a great question. We're looking for volunteers all the time. There's going to be a number of projects that'll be worked on. One of them, just to give you an example, is around homelessness, right? How do we address homelessness? Another one is creating public spaces for Mexicans and Americans. How can we share public spaces? And so if you're interested in helping out with any of the projects that we've put in the bid, we're looking for volunteers. You can get involved in the World Design Capital bid. Contact Michelle Morris. We need design expertise to actually work on these projects. And then it's, if any of you are inclined to donate, these projects require funding. And so we're looking for friends and colleagues who are willing to also donate to implementing these projects.
Those are 2 very concrete and great ways to get engaged. And it's true, like even for me, again, as a designer residence across the ocean, the Design Lab is very good at pulling or allowing talent to contribute. If you know what you are passionate about and what you are good at, and share that maybe in an email or in a message, just then they'll find a way for you to be connected. So that is the online community. I see there were some questions, and I hope this conversation goes on just in the comments below as we post this. And I think it shows you as very approachable, very open, and very, so excited that you're in this role, succeeding on Donald Norman, who got the design of everyday things, psychology of everyday things, but now taking it also to a larger scale thing of urban planning. Is there anything that you have as a question for the community or for me, or just to also give you the opportunity to pose a question for the community to answer?
How can the Design Lab serve the community better, serve designers better? What are some things, ideas, initiatives, or services that you would like to see in the Design Lab?
Yeah, wonderful. I hope people have ideas, wild ones or very concrete ones, and then we can answer them. Thank you very much. And we're hereby closing kind of the academic year. UCSD, University of California, San Diego is a campus. I know that life and work goes on, but it's also academic summer, and then these chats resume in September. And we also look for recommendations. So anyone who has an idea on a related topic, you as well. I would love to get a recommendation for a next chat partner from you as well. But thank you for today, Dr.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun. Thanks.
Okay, goodbye.